Back in the 1940s, no one needed permission just to live. Kids carried pocket knives. Families burned trash in the backyard. You could build a shed or send your son to town and nobody asked questions. And it wasn't reckless. It was just life. And it was normal. But over time, those ordinary freedoms quietly disappeared. So let's look back at 13 things we all did without thinking. Things that today you'd probably need a lawyer to explain. Guns at school, and no one blinked. Hard to believe now, but in the 1940s, a rifle in the school parking lot didn't raise a single eyebrow. In rural towns, boys drove to class with a .22 in the back window. Some schools had rifle clubs with locked cabinets, safety lessons, even target practice after school. Teachers supervised, nobody panicked. There were no lockdowns, no fear. Because back then, a rifle wasn't seen as a threat. It was proof that a young man could be trusted. We didn't teach kids to be afraid. We taught them to be responsible. Today, even a toy gun gets the cops called. So what changed? Did your dad or grandpa ever talk about bringing rifles to school? I'd love to know what kind of stories were passed down in your family. Let's step out back to a time when families burned their trash in barrels, and the only permission they needed was common sense. Pocket knives in every boy's pocket. Back in the 1940s, just about every boy carried a pocket knife, and no one batted an eye. It wasn't about danger. It meant you were growing up. You had something sharp in your pocket and knew how to handle it. We carved our initials into tree bark, sliced apples at lunch, maybe even helped our dads strip wire after dinner. You could bring a knife to school and no one would flinch. That little knife said someone trusted you and figured you'd earn that trust by how you used it. Today, a folding knife could get a kid kicked out. But we didn't live in fear, we just learned to be careful because someone expected us to. And next, let's talk about fire, the kind we started in our own backyards. Burning trash right in your backyard? Every backyard used to have a burn barrel. Ours sat behind the shed, rusted, dented, and always warm. On Saturdays, we tossed in food wrappers, junk mail, even old Sears catalogs. You could smell the paper smoke down the block. No one called the fire department. No permits, no garbage trucks, just fire, ash, and a rake to stir it around. We didn't wait for someone else to clean it up. We handled our own mess, because that's just what you did. Today, try that, and you'll get fined, maybe even arrested. But back then, it was just part of Saturday, and sometimes the best chance all week to chat with your neighbor. Next, let's talk about hitchhiking, when getting picked up by a stranger wasn't strange at all. Hitchhiking was how we got around. Back then, sticking your thumb out on the side of the road wasn't reckless. It was transportation. Hitchhiking was how teenagers got to town, how soldiers got home, how strangers became friends. People didn't fear each other like they do now. They rolled down the window, asked where you were headed, and offered a ride. We weren't glued to headlines or worst-case thinking. We trusted our instincts and each other. Of course, it wasn't always perfect, but it was common, and it worked. Today, stick your thumb out, and someone's calling the cops or speeding away. But there was a time when the only thing more dangerous than a stranger's car was what you lit with your own two hands. Homemade fireworks, no supervision needed. There was a time when lighting explosives was a childhood milestone. We had cherry bombs, M80s, silver salutes, loud enough to rattle windows and scare dogs 3 blocks away. No safety goggles, no adult supervision, just a match, a short fuse, and the scramble to get clear before the bang. Sometimes fingers got burned, sometimes mailboxes didn't survive. It was loud, it was risky, and we couldn't get enough of it, because danger wasn't avoided. It was managed by learning the hard way. Today, even sparklers come with a warning label, but back then, fire and noise were part of growing up, and somehow, we turned out okay. Of course, that wasn't the only thing we lit up as kids, and somehow, after all that smoke and noise, we still found our way home without anyone watching us. Letting kids walk miles alone. Back then, a kid walking 5 miles alone didn't make the news. We walked to school, to the store, to a friend's house across town. No cell phone, no GPS, no panic. Sometimes with a pocket knife, sometimes barefoot. You knew the streets, you knew the neighbors, and most of all, the grown-ups knew you could handle yourself. It wasn't neglect, it was trust, and earning that trust was part of growing up. Today, let a 9-year-old walk to the corner store and someone's calling child services. But once upon a time, independence wasn't suspicious. It was expected. And if you grew up like that, you probably remember what came after the walk home. A little work, a little sweat, and no paycheck in sight. No ID, still just fine. In the 1940s, most folks got by without ever showing an ID. You could get a job, buy supplies, ride the train, even cash a check, no photo, no license, no questions. People knew who you were, and that was enough. The clerk didn't need a card, he needed your word. There was no paranoia, no scanner at the door, no one shouting, "I need to see some ID." You were trusted until you gave someone a reason not to be. Today, you can't pick up a package without a state-issued ID and a barcode. But back then, your name and your handshake were as good as any government form. Ever hear about how your old man first got behind the wheel? Drop a story if you remember. Those tales always stuck with us. And if you think that sounds wild, wait till you hear how we handled meat. Selling home-butchered meat, no license. Out in the country, we didn't need USDA stamps or inspector signatures. We butchered our own hogs, wrapped the meat in paper, and sold it straight out of the smokehouse. Neighbors knew who raised it. They knew how it was fed, and they trusted you because they'd eaten at your table. There weren't any labels, no nutrition facts, no government checklist, just fresh meat, a handshake, and a fair price. Today, try selling home-butchered pork without a license and you'll end up in court. But back then, feeding your community didn't require permission. And when it came to taking care of our own, we didn't stop at food. Even childbirth was handled right at home. Midwives without a medical degree. Babies didn't always arrive in hospitals, and the women who caught them didn't have framed degrees on the wall. They were neighbors, sometimes grandmothers, women with calloused hands, calm voices, and a towel ready on the stove. They knew what to do because they'd done it before, and because someone had trusted them to learn. The bedroom became the delivery room. The whole family helped, and no one needed a billing code. Today, try helping with a home birth without a license, and you're in legal trouble fast. But back then, midwives weren't outsiders. They were part of the village, and once the baby was swaddled and sleeping, there was no rest. There was work to be done. Kids doing real jobs at age 10. When we were 10, we didn't play pretend jobs. We had real ones. Some of us bagged groceries at the corner market. Others delivered papers before the sun came up or pushed heavy mowers from yard to yard for a few bucks. Out in the country, kids were tossing hay bales, shoveling stalls, or helping their dads with chores that would make OSHA faint today. Nobody called it child labor. It was just what you did. We weren't sheltered. We were trusted. And that trust made us proud. Nothing beat the feeling of earning your own money, even if your hands were blistered by the end of the day. Now, put a 12-year-old behind a register and someone's calling the news. Back then, it just meant you were finally pulling your weight. Buildings went up. No permits, no inspectors. If you had a patch of land and an idea, that was enough. You didn't fill out forms or wait for signatures. You just got to work. Dads built garages, barns, even whole homes, framed by hand and finished by grit. No one came around with a checklist or measuring tape. If it stood and didn't fall, that was good enough. Sometimes neighbors pitched in. Sometimes it was just you and a hammer on a Saturday morning. No zoning codes, no inspectors, no red tape. Just pride in doing it yourself. It didn't matter if your porch wasn't up to code because it was yours. Now, you need permission to build a chicken coop. Back then, you just built it, and no one stood in your way. Everyone smoked. everywhere. The smell of smoke was just part of life. You'd walk into a diner and it'd hit you, coffee, bacon, and a faint cloud of Lucky Strikes hanging in the air. Your mom might be pushing a cart through the grocery store with a cigarette in hand, ash barely hanging on. Doctors had ashtrays on their desks, pilots lit up mid-flight, and no one looked twice. Cigarettes weren't hidden, they were handed out at company parties, included in military rations, even advertised by cartoon characters. At dinner, Dad might light one up before dessert, and Grandma wouldn't even blink. No warning labels, no judgment, just a flick of the match, a deep inhale, and business as usual. Today, it would cause outrage. Back then, it was just Tuesday. Did your dad or grandpa smoke indoors without a second thought? Drop your story below. We'd love to know how common it was in your house growing up. The government trusted you with a gun, but not a chicken coop. In the 1940s, you could buy a rifle at the hardware store. No paperwork, no waiting period, and no questions asked. A teenager could walk out with a .22 under one arm and a box of shells in the other. And nobody called the cops. Guns were for hunting, for protection, for sport. You kept one in your truck, one behind the door, and maybe another in the barn. And the government? They didn't mind. But try building a backyard chicken coop today without a permit, and suddenly you're a criminal. Zoning boards show up, inspectors knock. Because apparently eggs are more dangerous than ammunition. We used to be trusted with real responsibility. Now we have to ask permission to raise a hen. Back in the 1940s, we didn't need permission to live freely. We were trusted to work, build, protect, and raise families without red tape. That wasn't reckless. That was America. If you remember those days, or wish we still lived that way, leave a comment and share your story. Let's remind the world what real freedom looked like.